off by having you tell us what role you see MGX playing in not just financing, but shaping the next generation of AI infrastructure. And I mean, across your international portfolio. It's just such a vast topic at the moment.
So Ryan, thanks for having me. And it's a pleasure to be here. And it's great to see such a full room. Maybe just taking a step back for those of you who are not familiar with MGX, we're an AI-focused investment fund based in Abu Dhabi, really focused on investing across the AI thematic, right? That is semiconductors, AI infrastructure, and AI technology and advanced technologies. We've been in establishment for about 2 years now, and we've invested across these spaces, and we'll touch on the different spaces across over the course of the conversation. One of the key themes that we've seen when it comes to AI infrastructure, that's really where your question was, Ryan, was the importance of capital formation at scale with the right longevity in order to support the compute build out that fully allows fully unleashes the economic potential and the productivity potential of the technology. And so some of the things that we've done, Ryan, has really been focused on what are the core platforms that are based in the geographies where compute build out is required at scale. And so MGX is invested in 2 of the top 3 AI infrastructure builders and developers in North America and the United States, Advantage North America and Align Data Centers. And we've also put together an AI infrastructure partnership. This is an open-ended fund, $30 billion of capital formation and equity, $100 billion in total capital formation if you include the debt. And the idea there is you're able to form capital at scale that's able to follow the amount of capital that's required in order to build out the infrastructure. That's key because that's really what unlocks the value of the technology. And we've been hearing a lot about the AI bubble and the compute bubble. But the reality is not all compute is created equal. Making sure that you have compute at the right geographies, the right scale, backed by the right hyperscalers, built by the right developers and not speculators is critical to the success of the industry.
So it's very clear that that is capital at scale. The other thing that is needed is energy at scale. Like if you combine those 2 factors, how does that sort of capital strength and power availability shape your competitive advantage in this race? And what does it mean for where these facilities get built at the end of the day?
Yeah, I'll start with the number. It's, $30 billion sounds like a big number. It is a big number, but then as we think about the amount of capital that the space ultimately requires, it's actually a tiny number. The way to actually think about it is that today we sit on around global capacity of around 80 to 100 gigawatts, again, globally. We believe that that gets closer to 200 to 220 gigawatts over the course of the next 5 years. If you think about what it takes to build a gigawatt of capacity, we're talking $10 to $15 billion for the core and shell, another $30 billion for the kit. And so very quickly, whether you're bullish or bearish when it comes to AI infrastructure and compute, you end up with trillions of dollars of capital formation capacity. That's real scale, right? So $30 billion is really a drop in the bucket of what's ultimately required. Power is a real constraint. And it's not just power, it's when does the power get delivered and how does that map to the compute requirements for the different applications? One point that folks forget is, although we're still all experiencing this journey of AI adoption and broader AI enablement, the reality is if we look at the United States compute to cloud penetration, for instance, and that's the most advanced, the most penetrated market, you're at 50% cloud penetration. Right. So
in some markets, it's like 12%. I was stunned when AWS told me that.
Yeah. Exactly. So there's still a tremendous amount of runway from a compute needs perspective when it comes to just cloud. So when you overlay AI, you really need to be maniacally focused on the scale of compute. And so it is important to work with the industry in order to get the right power at the right locations to serve the different loads that are ultimately required.
Yeah. So obviously, when we look at all those numbers and just the endless construction that's going on, like this is clearly the start of a long-term transformation. Somehow, someday, all of that infrastructure is going to get used. How much of a risk is there in the meantime that we do have some kind of AI infrastructure bubble that people are going to get tanked or facilities are going to go unused in the short or medium term?
Ryan, that's absolutely the right question. We've consistently, and this is, I'd say, what's unique about MGX is having invested across the different pillars or across the thematic, you get signals from the actual users of the compute. and it's consistent that compute availability has been the biggest obstacle to product development and product rollout consistently. And so we can pick examples from OpenAI's product rollouts or Anthropic's product rollouts or even development. The amount of compute that's required is insufficient today and will continue to be insufficient. And that's in a world where adoption is still not at its peak or in true penetration. If we think about enterprise adoption right now, we're looking at about 1% of adoption, 1% of coding spend, for instance, is AI spend. That's 1% of a $700 billion market. The runway is significant, and so I think the risk when it comes to compute overbuild is actually the wrong risk to be thinking about. We think there's actually going to be an underbuild of compute based on the adoption that we're seeing today.
And if there is any overbuild, it's more a mismatch of where it is rather than an actual overbuild. Yeah, okay, got it. Now let's throw it forward. What are the most exciting trends in AI infrastructure that you're focused on in 2026?
So I made mention of this in reference to this earlier, and I think it's really important to note. Not all compute is created equal. Where is the compute located? In what availability zones? Who does it serve? Is there offtake, or is it backed by credit-worthy offtake? Is it hyperscaler compute or is it speculative? I think these are all questions that are very important to think about and to answer. And naturally, what you're going to end up seeing is that hyperscalers are going to need to outsource more compute because that is and more development. That is putting a burden on their balance sheets. There needs to be an at-scale solution when it comes to financing that is not hyperscaler balance sheet financing. And so naturally, you'll start seeing more outsourcing. We believe that you'll start seeing more GPU as a service at scale. Our view today is that that's still a model that needs further refinement in order to generate appropriate returns for investors to invest more in that space, but it's absolutely required to unlock GPU as a service at the scale that it needs to be unlocked at. And eventually, I think the aspiration here is you need to get to a token as a service or an intelligence as a service model, because that really allows the SMEs to access intelligence in the same ways that larger companies can access intelligence today. That's the true unlock when it comes to productivity and economic gains.
And is there any kind of geographical consideration with this, in the sense that folks might be worried at some point about getting cut off from a market in some particular way, and they need this compute to be local so that they don't find their AI infrastructure has just disappeared overnight because of some political disruption?
Listen, I think what we're seeing consistently is that there's compute being built out globally today. Actually, MGX is invested heavily in North America. It's a heavily North America focused mandate. But we have the single largest site in France, 1.4 gigawatts, about 50 kilometers southeast of Paris. And there's going to need to be a compute build out in Europe. There will be an at-scale compute build out that's required in Asia. And so naturally, we're seeing a tremendous amount of mobilization from developers and from hyperscalers to ensure that they're able to serve their customer bases across the world at the appropriate latency. And I think that that's also important as we think about cloud latency and AI latency. Those latency requirements are different, but they still require some element of proximity to the core geographies that the hyperscalers are serving.
That's definitely what I'm hearing too. Now, maybe one last question to wrap it up. You've been in a lot of interesting rooms all week in Davos. Any light bulb moments, any insights that you're really sort of taking away in your bag when you pack it tonight?
Ryan, I think that's a really good question. I
can share one of mine.
No, I think the most interesting thing I heard, it was actually yesterday, probably the last session I was at yesterday in the Congress Center. The backlog of IPOs is significant. Now, I think we are underestimating how significant it is. It can be anywhere between $1 to $2 trillion of backlog, and this is in the United States. If you think about, in any good year, right, probably can absorb in the US markets like $300 billion of primary, maybe another $200 billion of M&A. And so you're going to need a few good years to absorb the amount of capital that's out there. Something to think about for the founders and for the investors that are invested in a lot of these names. I think, again, when it comes to the scale of the numbers, whether it's AI infrastructure or in AI technology, a lot of the labs, the numbers have become astronomical. And as you think about the path to monetization, because ultimately there has to be a path to monetization, we're starting to test the laws of gravity.
Excellent. Good news for any of those banks involved in the IPOs ahead in 2026. Ali Osman, thank you so much for joining us here on stage.